Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about something you hear about constantly in the news, the trade deficit. It's almost always made out to be this terrible thing, right? But is that the whole story? Let's find out.
Yeah, being in the red on trade is often painted as a sign of economic failure. But what does it actually mean? Is it really a sign of weakness? Or, and this might sound a little crazy, could it actually be a sign of economic strength? To figure that out, we've got to look way beyond the headlines.
To really get to the bottom of this, we need to forget about just adding up exports and imports. That trade balance number, it's just one little piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. And that puzzle is called the current account.
Okay, I know, that sounds super academic, but just think of it like this. It's a country's total financial scorecard with the rest of the planet. It's not just about the stuff we buy and sell, it tracks all the money flowing back and forth from things like investments. And here it is. This is the simple equation that changes everything. A current account deficit just means a country's investing more than it's saving. That's it. When investment is bigger than what you've saved up, you have to get that money from somewhere else. You borrow it from abroad. This completely shifts the debate from who's selling what to a country's big picture choices about its future. So how should we think about these huge national financial decisions? Well, there's this really powerful economic theory called the intertemporal approach, and it gives us a great analogy. Just think of a whole country's economy as if it were a single household.
And when you look at it this way, the parallels are pretty amazing. You know, a household saves up for retirement? Well, a country can run a surplus to build up its wealth. A family takes out a huge loan, a mortgage, to buy a house. A country borrows to build new factories and roads. And just like you might have to put things on a credit card to get through a tough month if you lose your job, a country might need to borrow during a recession. Suddenly, borrowing doesn't seem so bad, does it? It can be a totally rational, smart, forward-thinking move.
And that really gets to the heart of it. This whole approach sees the current account not as some static number on a report, but as the grand total of millions of decisions people and companies are making about the future. It's basically a measure of a country's mood. Is it feeling optimistic and investing for tomorrow, or is it feeling cautious and saving for a rainy day?
So if a deficit is basically a loan, then what a country is doing is something economists call intertemporal trade, or more simply, trading across time. It's choosing to have more and invest more today by promising to pay it all back down the road. It's a trade-off between now and later.
Of course, a country's ability to even make that trade-off has changed a lot over the years. Back in the day, under the gold standard, money moved freely across borders, and you saw these huge imbalances. Then, for most of the 20th century, governments put up walls, called capital controls, that pretty much stopped the music. It's only really since the 1970s that we're back in an era where money can zip around the globe, which is exactly why we're seeing this theory play out in such a big way today.
All right, enough theory. Does this idea actually hold up in the real world? Let's take a look at a couple of major historical events and see.
So check out Canada at the turn of the 20th century. It was running these massive deficits. We're talking almost 20% of its entire national income. That is huge. So what was going on? Were they just on a wild shopping spree? No way. They were borrowing tons of money from the UK to build railroads and infrastructure. They were literally building their country's future with borrowed money.
Or how about Norway in the 1970s? They discovered all this oil in the North Sea. But, you can't just suck oil out of the ocean floor with a straw. They had to borrow a ton of money to invest in the rigs and pipelines and technology to get it out. It was a textbook case of borrowing to fund an incredibly productive investment.
These examples really show that a deficit isn't automatically a bad thing. When a country borrows to finance productive investments, like Canada's railroads or Norway's oil rigs, it's acting like a smart startup. It can be a sign of a vibrant, optimistic economy that's investing in its own future.
Now, this is way more than just a cool academic theory. It has really profound implications for how policymakers should think about the economy and how we should all interpret the news.
In fact, the economists who pioneered this whole way of thinking, Obstfeld and Rogoff, they were pretty blunt about it. They argued that this new approach should completely replace the old models. They basically said, hey, all you central banks and finance ministries, this forward-looking view is a much smarter, more coherent way to make your big policy decisions. So if you walk away with one thing, let it be this. The next time you see a headline freaking out about a trade deficit, stop and ask a different question. Don't just ask, is it big? Ask, what's it for? The really critical question isn't how much a country is borrowing, it's why. Is it just to buy more stuff today, or is it to invest in a richer tomorrow?
And that is the billion-dollar question, isn't it? This approach doesn't say all deficits are good. Not at all. What it does is give us a much sharper lens to tell the difference, to separate the smart borrowing of a future powerhouse from the reckless borrowing that leads to a crisis. It helps us look past the scary headlines and start asking the right questions. Thanks for watching.